So, Coach, there's a lot there. There's an old saying in media, don't pick a fight with anyone that buys ink by the barrel, because it's a fight you can't win. The modern-day version of that is don't pick a fight with the fans, because they have the ink. There's 80,000 of them at a game. They all have access to social media. Like, it's just a fight, generally speaking, you can't win when athletes pick fights with the fans. Your reaction to all of this, and if Deshaun deserves to be the Week 1 starter for the Browns?
I felt that the booing when he got hurt was really unfair, and I understand a fan base's frustration with the way that this has all unfolded in terms of the expectations that he came in with, the commitment that they gave to him organizationally in terms of was it $250 million guaranteed, the only fully guaranteed contract in history, the amount of draft picks they gave up, and then the performance that he was having, as well as all the off-the-field issues and the distractions that went into. That being said, to cheer anybody getting injured, to me, is out of bounds. Says that things like that happen in stadiums? Yeah, there's things like that happen all the time. And when you're in professional sports or in any area where you're public-facing, you're going to receive some criticism that just comes with it. And you have to expect that, and unfortunately, you've got to roll with it. In this situation, he was frustrated during the game. He thought he was going to get a different reaction. But there's still a high level of frustration with him, and there's a different level of excitement with Shedeur about the possibilities of what he can be, to where I think a lot of people and a lot of fans in Cleveland just want to move on from Deshaun Watson.
Well, it's not time yet. And this is the cold, hard truth reality, because there are a lot of layers to this story. So I'll address the thing that you said off the bat. I obviously can understand on some sort of human level why suffering a career-altering injury and then being cheered by your home fans would sting a human being and impact a guy's psyche. I can obviously understand that. I remember covering the Chiefs when Matt Castle was struggling and he got hurt, and some people cheered, and Eric Winston came to his defense in like a very passionate public thing, and it went very viral in like the early days of virality. Like, players do not like when their home fans cheer the player. I understand all of that. I still feel like, though, that Deshaun Watson doesn't get it. I don't think he gets it, because he says that that's not performance-based, and it obviously is. Like, if Deshaun Watson, after they gave up 3 first-round picks and $230 million fully guaranteed, which they gave him that trade after over 24 women accused him of sexual assault, harassment, inappropriate conduct during massages. They made that trade after those allegations came out. If he had gone to Cleveland and balled out, we have seen so many instances of so many stories of so many different people who have done things off the field that are immoral, illegal, and any varying degrees within that realm, where the fans cheer for the player because they cheer for the performance. And Deshaun has been awful. It was a franchise-crippling transaction. The worst trade, the worst contract in the history of the NFL, and they're still dealing with it. And I feel like people have said that and then still not fully grasped how much it would set them back. Like, I saw people today saying, well, the Browns should just cut Deshaun Watson.
Hey, you can't.
They can't. They cannot cut him. He has to be on the roster this year for financial reasons, or it would be even more crippling into the future. If they cut him after this year and make it a post-June 1 designation, it still will be $86 million of dead cap money spread out over the next 2 years. When we say it is the worst transaction in NFL history, it is backed up by the draft picks, the money, the PR, and the immovability of the contract, and how poorly he's played.
You're forgetting one element: Baker Mayfield. How well he's doing in Tampa Bay.
Right, and so that's exactly right. And they're going to play Baker Mayfield in week 2. And so, let's just throw up the football numbers. For Deshaun to say this is not performance-based, that is what Cleveland has gotten as a return on their investment. Those numbers are across the board atrocious. So, yes, he received some boos early. I'm not saying that it wasn't throughout that entire performance. But if he would have gone 10 of 12, for 136 yards with a touchdown instead of 5 of 12 for 36 yards and no touchdown, there also would have been cheers. So for him to remove the performance aspect of this is just to deny reality.
Yeah, I imagine he keeps going back to the injury moment.
Of course, because it's the first time he was on the field since then, and he wants to be cheered for the return to injury as the conquering hero, but he's not a sympathetic figure. He's not. He is not the victim here.
He's not sympathetic at all, and it is performance-based, to your point, as if he had gotten hurt after having Houston-type numbers and playing like he had done there, it would be a totally different thing. And you're right, too. Guys have done a lot of things off the field that have been overlooked if they're performing on the field, which he hasn't. It's not only been bad, it's been terrible. And you know, the boos are just part of what you deal with when the performance is not very good.
And the other thing, this is not a good sign for Shedeur Sanders, because the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson knowing the PR hit they were going to take because they thought they were getting a top 5 young quarterback in football. That's why they did it. They're like, okay, there's all of this horrible stuff out there, but we have had no good quarterbacks in the history of our franchise, so we are going to take that hit to go out and get one. And right now, Deshaun did not look good. Shedeur has not looked good. There have been varying reports about who's been better at various times in practices, all those sort of things. Neither option is the quarterback of the future for the Browns, but Todd Monken wants to win week 1. And he is saying, we're going to put him out there. And I thought that Deshaun today, when he walked back his comments, struck the right tone. And he also said, you know, we've got 2 weeks, we start on the road before we come home to hopefully change how the reception would be going forward. It would not surprise me at all if Deshaun plays poorly against Jacksonville and poorly against Cleveland against Tampa, and the Browns are 0-2 for that home opener, that Shedeur Sanders starts the home opener.
Yeah, they're both going to play during the course of the season.
No question.
But what is benefiting Deshaun Watson right now is what's happened in recent NFL history with Sam Darnold, with Baker Mayfield, with Geno Smith, with all of these guys who have had second acts. So now the league is looking at this and saying, guys can who have been good in the past or have shown tremendous potential can do that again. You know, whether it's a change of scenery, whether it's a change of head coach. And as they made this decision, if you pull this up, Deshaun had one small run where he was 5-1 as a starter before he got hurt. And I thought the numbers were going to be even more skewed towards him. But the 61.4 completion percent, it's not as skewed as much.
A lot of those games he was carried by a pretty damn good Browns defense.
And I'm not saying that's not the case, but it's the idea, and it's a copycat league, and you look at past trends and you say, okay, this is what's happened, and these are real life examples, and we've seen significant amount of success with guys getting second chances who have a history of production. So whether it's ownership or whether it's the front office or where it's coming from, they're hoping that that's what's going to happen here. And if it doesn't happen, at least it puts you've got a final sort of body of work to close this chapter indefinitely.
And Albert Breer said it on Colin earlier today. He's exactly right. I do think it is easier to go from Deshaun to Shedeur than Shedeur to Deshaun. Just because of the money invested in Deshaun, the age of Deshaun Watson, the 5th-round pick, you could say, all right, Shedeur will wait, he'll develop, he maybe will be our QB2 of the future. I think that Shedeur has a real chance to be on the Browns next year. I think it's almost zero. I think it's 0% that Deshaun Watson is on the Browns next season.
Yeah, ideally he would play well and you could have him in the building in some context, because you talked about it. It's about $30 million next year in dead money and $50 million the following year in dead money. So if you could figure out a way to push that off again, it's better for business. It just doesn't look like it's going to happen that way. But we're going to get to find out really early in the season what we're looking at.
Feels like we have a 2-week sample to me of Deshaun Watson before the next real decision has to come in. It's a great quote. I don't think we have a very deep team. What's your reaction to him being that forthcoming?
Well, he talked about it today too.
On the radio.
And he explained what he meant by that, and there's a lot of truth to this. We've changed the preseason, so now we're at 3 games instead of 4, and you've got to be able to evaluate the group of young guys that are there, and so you have a smaller window to do that. Usually, the 4th game is where you're able to see all those guys, and if you don't feel like you know who the 3rd outside linebacker is going to be, who the 5th offensive lineman is going to be, who the core special teams guys are going to be, and you've got this group of candidates, the best way to determine how those guys are going to distinguish themselves is by playing them. So that's part of it. Now the other part is that if you don't feel like that next guy in is a comparable upgrade, then you better do everything you can to protect the guys that you have. And the worst thing that can happen is to lose guys in preseason. We see it with the Chargers. They lost a starter. We've seen it with the Commanders. They lost the Tunsil. So it's a mix where you want to see the guys that are candidates to make the squad, and you also want to protect the guys that you have, so you have the best opportunity to play them in meaningful games.
So I always come out on the side of rest the guys who matter, because I just believe that I'd rather deal with a little bit of week 1 rust among my best players than have fresh guys for week 1 but they're backups because my starters got hurt in meaningless games. That's where the Sean McVay school, basically, of thought. He does not play his guys in the preseason. It seems to work out pretty well for him. But great coaches have gone the other way. Andy Reid normally gives guys a tune-up. So I'm not saying that this is confirmed science. You can debate things on either side. I just thought that Mike Vrabel, and I listened to a couple of the clips from the Greg Hill morning show in Boston that he went on, because I guess people in Boston were taking it as was this a shot at Elliott Wolf, the general manager, for not giving him enough? And I didn't take it that way at all. He was saying, we need to figure out who our 6th tackle is and who our 3rd linebacker is. And we know who our starters are, but it's more important for us to identify who our backups are going to be, which is totally fair. But the Patriots are a deep football team. They are. They just went through an entire draft, and none of the players that they drafted are, as of today, projected to be starters. Caleb Lomu,
that could be really good or really bad. That either means that your starters are really talented, or that means that the guys you drafted aren't as good as you hoped they'd be.
Sure,
but that's a very optimistic way to look at it.
But most teams, most years, good teams and bad, have to start at least 1 or 2 rookies who they draft. There's just so much turnover in the NFL. That's generally speaking how it works.
But if you're drafting an offensive lineman number 1 or in the 1st round, you're expecting that guy to come in and play 1,000 reps. You're expecting him to start. So the fact that he's not starting, and it's not like their offensive line last year, everybody was looking at it and saying, okay, this is the strongest group in the NFL.
The reports on Caleb Lomu so far have not been that encouraging, but they've also played him at different positions to try. He might be the 28th or whatever it was, 30th pick in the draft, and be more of a swing type of player and a backup for now before he moves into a starting role. But when you're playing guys
at different positions who you've drafted number 1 overall, it's not because you're just trying to build flexibility. It's trying to see whether he can beat out one of those guys that you're playing.
Look, I'm sure they would be thrilled if he was ready to come in and be I'm going to be the left guard or I'm going to be the right tackle for the future. I'm in complete agreement with you. But that team, I pull up their roster. It's what is their big weakness? I know everyone is concerned about the left side of their offensive line, but there's no perfect team in football. Their roster, to me, looks considerably better on paper than it did last year, and they were in the Super Bowl.
But to Mike's point, then, if none of those guys have been able to beat out the ones must be significantly better. So then, from his perspective, what's the best thing to do? Protect that group, and then let all these other guys play.
I guess, you're right. That is definitely a way to look at it. How many teams would trade rosters with the Patriots? If the Patriots aren't a deep team, who is? How many deep teams are there? I think they're pretty well equipped compared to the majority of teams in the league.
Any time you're going from the 1 to 2, there's going to be a drop off. Probably. It's just how big of a drop off is it? And that's from Mike's perspective, it's too big to risk losing one of those guys.
Do you expect the Ravens defense to return to their dominant form?
Was thinking a lot about preseason, and there were times going through preseason, let's say you're struggling on third down in preseason, or you're struggling in the red zone in preseason. My experience is that those problems tend to follow you into the regular season. And you'd like to say, okay, you're doing great in those areas, and you'd like to think there's this correlation between preseason performance and what you're going to get to during the regular season, but there's no definitive studies that show that correlation exists.
That makes sense.
So it's positive in the sense that if you are a new head coach and a new defensive coordinator, and you go out in those first two opportunities for guys to see what you're doing, and then they have a lot of success, and then I think against Philly didn't have a first down against them, all positive. But on the flip side, this is a little bit of an indictment of Philly's offense and Minnesota's offense as well. Now, their numbers last year for Baltimore weren't very good, if we can bring them up. So you talked about the points per game at 18th, but look at the pass yards per game, not bad against the rush at the top 10, total yards per game 24th, and most of those guys are back. Now they had two guys on the team that have bumped up who are now starters, and they had Trey Hendrickson and Nate Wiggins, their number 1 overall draft pick at cornerback, so that should help the passing game component. It's just, can they go from 30th in offensive yards per game to a top 10 pass defense? Can they go from 24th in total yards per game to a top 10? It's hard to find the correlation of teams that have made that.
I don't think preseason, I would have answered this question yes before I saw the games in the preseason. I loved what they did this offseason. Now, they tried to get Max Crosby, backed out, ended up with Trey Hendrickson, but they were able to retain their draft capital in addition to it. Thought that worked out pretty well for Baltimore. And Jesse Minter overachieved relative to the talent that he had with the Chargers. So let's just first start with the Ravens side of it. This is what returning to dominance would look like for the Ravens. Last year was a year off for them. The thing that was devastating for them last year was the pass rush went away. Mm-hmm. And that's why they went out and got Hendrickson. Matty Luque's injury certainly played a role in it. But Baltimore had been, with this roughly collection of talent, they had been able to disrupt and make the other team's quarterback uncomfortable. Last year, that went away, so teams were like, we're not going to run against you. We're going to just sit back and throw because our quarterbacks are going to have all the time in the world to pick them apart. And Jesse Minter with the Chargers, we were trying to figure out the best way to quantify this, and I'm not going to say that this is exact science, what I'm about to show you here, but I think if you just pulled up the rosters, you'd agree with me anyway. Look at the All-Pros, guys who have ever been an All-Pro on the Ravens versus where the Chargers were. The Ravens have the most defensive players who have been All-Pros. Now, that's not necessarily, not last year they were All-Pros, but at any time in their career. And only Calais Campbell is really past his prime. You're talking about Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, Trey Hendrickson, first or second team All-Pros. If Jesse Minter was able to have the Chargers defense be better than the Ravens defense, considerably, with lesser talent, why would I not think that if Jesse Minter goes to a team with excellent talent, he won't be able to coach them up and be great?
Yeah, you look at a guy's track record of success, and you'd like to think that, you could go from one team to another team and be able to carry that concept forward and it'll hit. But do the things that the Chargers did well that allowed them to be where they were, will the Ravens be able to do it as well, under the same system? Do you have the same type of communicators? Are you going to carry the same philosophy? If they were built, and I'm not sure what Jesse's pressure philosophy is, if he was more of a high pressure guy with the Chargers, but they're not really built for that. In Baltimore, is it going to be apples to apples? It's encouraging right now. I'd say the other addendum is he's head coach, defensive coordinator, so he doesn't have the same level of time that he can spend on the defense that he had the luxury of having in LA.
So you don't buy right. So he's got to have head coach responsibilities, not just focus on that side of the ball. So you don't buy, to make it an analogy, Jesse Minter's a great race car driver, and he just got given a faster car.
Well, we see this all the time where a guy is an offensive guru. Just look at Denver. Sean Payton is pretty well established as as an outstanding offensive coach.
Yeah, great play caller.
But what's Denver been known for since he's been there? Their defense. It hasn't been their offense. So it's not apples to apples from when he was in New Orleans to when he was in Denver. He hasn't changed philosophically as a head coach. He hasn't forgotten how to coach offense. It's just been a very different group of players that he's got to pull together and try to figure out how to make it like he had in New Orleans.
Try not to fall for the preseason hype. Count NFL.com's Bucky Brooks among those buying Cowboys stocks. Brooks writes, I'm not crying wolf. 2026 is the year the boys reemerge as a true Super Bowl contenders. And he gave his 3 reasons why. He says, Dak Prescott is an underrated MVP candidate. The Cowboys' unstoppable offense is even better in 2026. And finally, defensive coordinator Christian Parker is quietly building a real defense. Now, Brian Hoyer, kind enough to join us now. Brian, we'll get you in here. Is the hype around the Cowboys, and now this is sports talk on television, so we love to hype the Cowboys. Is the hype on the Cowboys too high, too low, or just right?
Well, Coach and I were kind of brought up, and the rule was don't believe or fuel the hype. But I'm in the media now, so I'm all about the hype, Danny. I'm with you.
Thank you.
Look, to me, the biggest flaw of the Cowboys has been the weakness on the defense. Well, what did they do in the offseason? They addressed the defense. Obviously, they traded for Quinnen Williams last year, but they go out and get Rashawn Gary. You draft Caleb Downs, who I thought was probably the most pro-ready prospect in the draft last year. And you go and get Kobe Durant, Jalen Thompson. So they made the improvements on the defense. And really, offensively, there's no flaws. I mean, you got the duo at the receiver position between CeeDee Lamb and Pickens. Javonte Williams had a great year last year. I think Shoddy, taking over as the head coach, said, look, we got to emphasize the run game a little bit more. We can't just throw it all the time, even though we have these great receivers. And you throw in Ferguson in there in a really solid line. And I think Dak, look, as a quarterback, you're always going to get judged with how far can you take your team. But when it comes to being a leader, being a quarterback, throwing the football around, Dak is as good as any of them in the NFL. And so I'm all for the hype. I really do. And I think, especially in that division, the Eagles are at a bit of a transition right now, right? You got a new offensive coordinator, Sean Mannion, working in with Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown's gone. And the big thing is the Cowboys actually took one of the Eagles coaches in Coach Parker, and he's going to be over there kind of implementing that Vic Fangio style scheme. So I'm buying the hype on the Cowboys for sure.
You couldn't buy any Dallas Cowboys stock last preseason when Brian Schottenheimer took over. So Brian was my offensive coordinator in New York, and I really liked him, and I thought he was getting killed when they promoted him, and he was really talented, and he's shown that, which is great. And he's in year 2 of the system, but the hype's a little bit too high. As a stock, I'd say this is a hold as opposed to a buy right now. They haven't been to the NFC Championship in 30 years. And Dak's best season was his rookie season when he won 13 games, and he hasn't won 13 games since then. He's had some outstanding defenses. When Dan Quinn was there, they were great. And as much as the division is in flux, it's still a very talented division. Eagles in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. You got Washington, who knows where Jaden Daniels comes out this year. They were in the NFC Championship game. The Giants, they get Harbaugh. What does that transition look like? I know, Brian, you probably aren't manifesting. I don't think that was ever part of our program or had a shirt that said Gotti or any of that stuff. I think they're adding unnecessary pressure and expectations, and I don't see how that helps them. Danny loves it.
Yeah, I agree. I always along the lines of undersell, over deliver. But this is the Dallas Cowboys we're talking about. I think if you would have told me, when they traded Micah Parsons last year, I thought, man, that's your best defensive player. What are you doing? Well, you brought in Kenny Clark. You go and get Quinnen Williams. You draft a few guys. I really love Caleb Downs and what he brings to the defense. And with Christian Parker coming over from the Eagles, there's been a lot of talk about how Vic Fangio is using Cooper DeJean, right? I think Caleb Downs is going to play that role. He's going to be a safety where he can also cover the slot. Then he can move to nickel. He can move to the dime. So I look, there's a lot left to be seen, but I do know I really enjoyed watching Shoddy and the way the team responded to him last year. I think you have Dak, who's going to put the team in the best position to win. And if it's really about that defense, getting stops, because I think this offense is going to score 28 plus points a game.
So that's right there at the end, Brian, we know they have a Super Bowl caliber offense. And the question is, can their defense just be good enough? And what I love about the hype around Dallas this year is that even if you disagree with it, and sure, there was the acronym on the early press conference from Dak, and he wore the T-shirt when he reported to training camp. So cutesy things that you
Super Bowl alarm clock.
Yeah, the alarm clock. Okay, fine. But like, it is most of the hype is football driven. New coach on defense, no drama around a George Pickens contract. They retained George Pickens. They signed Quinnen Williams. They used 2 first-round picks on defensive players. They spent more money on a defensive player in free agency than any year since 2012. You had to go back to Brandon Carr. You know, I mean, they're going to have 5 new starters on defense this year, a new scheme on defense. To Brian's point, some questions in Philly. Like yes, it's. The Dallas Cowboys are a show. Jerry Jones produces it as such. Netflix documentary notwithstanding, so much media attention that little things are going to always seep its way into the bloodstream of the internet and the sports take industrial complex, like alarm clocks and T-shirts and stuff like that. And I know it's always going to drive you crazy, Coach. But the majority of the hype, I think, is about what if a top 5 offense gets a top 15 defense and how good they could be.
I've been so impressed by Jerry Jones this offseason.
That's part of it.
But 2 years ago, he said we're going all in, and they did nothing. And then this year, he said nothing, and they've literally gone all in. They drafted, they added free agents, they made trades, they spent money. I love that part of it. I think changing defensive coordinator, as much as we want to say, okay, there's definitely going to be this uptick, he still is a young defensive coordinator. I think he's the youngest they've ever had in Dallas, and so there's going to be a learning curve with him as well. Hopefully they can go from where they were last year, which we're not talking about a high starting point, to somewhere in the middle, and that should translate into more wins. I just don't think there's value to creating expectations in August as opposed to just quietly working and building up to the season and then going and having the expectations put on based off your performance.
Brian, do you think the defense is, like, what would you say your expectations are for the defense? Because it's a lot of new, so I think people like me are just like, well, it has to be better because it's different. Or do you actually believe in what they're doing there?
No, I think the scheme is actually going to fit the players that they have. They've acquired really good players to go along with it. Look, Coach and I are always going to are going to lean back on what we were brought up in. Until you go out and prove it, you kind of want to just sit there silently and sneak up on people. But this is Dallas. This is the gambler, Jerry Jones. And so he's kind of right. Like they didn't really talk much this offseason. They did their talking with the moves that they made. And so Christian Parker's got to go in. You got to install a system. That's going to take some time. There will be a little bit of growing pains. But if they can get that under wraps and get that going early in the season, we know the offense is going to score points. So I'm looking at this defense. If you start off and you gradually get a little bit better, and by the end of the year, you're playing, you understand the system, and you're only giving up 14. I think even if you give up 21 points, you would probably say the Cowboys have a good chance of winning that game.
All right, I'm coming out on just right on the amount of hype for the Cowboys right now because it's football hype. The Chargers, though, as we move on, were hit with some very bad news yesterday, really just confirming what we already expected. Veteran center Tyler Biadasz was placed on season-ending injured reserve. Biadasz suffered the damage to his ACL and additional injuries to his left knee during a joint practice with the 49ers last Tuesday. So that's their $30 million on that 3-year deal contract, Coach. Tyler Biadasz out for the season. Another offensive line injury in front of Justin Herbert. Too soon for Chargers fans to panic?
Yeah, look, it's terrible whenever you lose a starter. It's terrible when you lose a free agent that you spent a lot of money to bring in and hopefully upgrade the team. But the good news for the Chargers is their second-round draft pick was a center. And Jake Slaughter out of Florida, he started 33 games there. He's known to be smart, like a really smart player, athletic, so he'll be able to handle protections and things like that. And they've been working him at other spots. They've been working him at guard, but he's going back to his natural position. It's not like he was a guard that has to now transition into center. He's going from a position that he wasn't natural at to a position he is natural at. So it's about as good as it can be, considering that this is a season-ending injury, to have a second-round draft pick that a lot of people feel really good about to be able to plug in.
Yeah, I think Jake Slaughter is the saving grace in this situation. You drafted him in the second round. You were going to plug him in because he's going to be one of your best linemen playing at guard. Now you can slide him back over to your natural position. I will say this, having played in this West Coast system under Kyle Shanahan, who obviously Mike McDaniel is very close with, that center position is the heart and soul of that line. They make all the calls. They have to be able to get people going to the right blocking schemes, all of those things. When we were in Cleveland, we had Alex Mack, who was one of the best centers in the league. And midway through the season, we lost him, and we were able to hold it together for a little bit past that, a few weeks after he got hurt. But ultimately, he was so hard to replace. And so now you have to put that responsibility on this young center. But as Coach said, like, smart kid, athletic. And the one question I would have is, you have this great veteran quarterback in Justin Herbert. Does Mike McDaniel maybe say, hey, look, we're going to give you some of the responsibility that the center typically would have, because we need to work this guy in and get him ready and get his feet wet. He's a rookie playing arguably the most important position on the line with the scheme that we run.
So I hear you, Brian, on the importance of the center in that offense and on the offensive line and calling out the checks. But at best, he's their third best offensive lineman. Right? Yeah. He is their third best offensive lineman. Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt are back. They're two of the four highest paid players on the team. So I would just say you can't panic over your third best offensive lineman being injured. Like, if your third best offensive lineman being out for the season causes panic or derails your season, then you were never going to have a good year to begin with. Like, last year, why I got criticized for making excuses for Justin Herbert was pointing to the offensive line and all of the things that were around him. But I said, like, he lost one of the best left tackles in football and one of the best right tackles in football, and they started 10 different offensive line combinations, which was the second most in the NFL, and he was sacked. Only two guys in the league, Cam Ward and Geno Smith, were sacked more than Justin Herbert. Like, it was a critical mass. It was an accumulation of things. This isn't even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Corey Linsley, their Pro Bowl center, played a few games and then had, it was a heart problem that emerged. It was like an out of nowhere midseason thing, and it ended. Or Rashawn Slater the year before that, when he had tore his biceps. Like, the Chargers have dealt with way bigger setbacks than having a month before the season, 3.5 weeks before the season, their third best offensive lineman getting out. Like, I'm not saying it's not a loss. It is. But this should not be the type of thing that derails a season, Coach.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underrate the position of center because it's not a glamorous position. So when I was in New York in the first round, we drafted Nick Mangold. And when I was in Cleveland in the first round, we drafted Alex Mack. And for me, that was so important because he's one of two guys that handles the ball every single play. And then in our system, the quarterback would point out who the Mike was. In a lot of systems, the center has to point out who the Mike is, and he's responsible for the protection. So when you've got a person who's responsible for protection and setting that much responsibility for dealing with blitzes and things like that, it's easy to underestimate their value because, again, most people don't get it. But it's so critical to have a guy that can do that and do it really well.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the guy touches the football on every single play, getting it to the quarterback. And now not only you have to work on that, you got to get out there, and people take it for granted. But Coach, you know, if you fumbled a snap in practice here in New England, you were taking a lap. Like, this is something that you do every single day over and over again. You have to build up that relationship, and you got a young guy doing it now, taking over. Not only does he have to get people going and line up the right way, he's snapping the ball and having to block. And so you're right. He's their third best lineman because they have two great tackles, but he has to get everybody going in the right direction.
Brian, how many times did you hear it's the most basic play in football? They're doing it at Foxborough High School, like 1,000 times.
You know, my rookie year, I fumbled a snap. They put me in there with the Stars with Dan Copen. I fumbled a snap, and Dan cussed me out the entire lap around. You rookie, you can't get the snap. So, like, people take it for granted. They do, but it's one of those things. There's some intricacies to that, and now they're going to have to get caught up on the center snap, the cadence, all of those things. Jake Slaughter is going to have to get up to speed on now that he's touching the football and not playing guard.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.